And I'll say a very good evening to everybody who's joining us tonight. This is the Front Range 6-meter group. Bill WT0DX and myself started this thing back in April last year. And we seem to have a lot of interesting folks to come on here and talk. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Hasan N0AN, who I've always heard so much about and heard on the air, and Jim W7OUU in Idaho, who's got a really good signal into here all the time. So without any further ado, I'm going to switch over and share the screen. That kicks this thing off, and hopefully everyone else can see it. There we go. And Hasan, would you like to kick it off?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would like to greet everybody. I've never seen the faces of almost any of you, and it's a real kick to see so many interesting faces. And by the way, Bill ND0B, I should tell you that Rich says that you need a haircut. Now on to more important things. This is not a theoretical presentation. It is not a technical presentation. It is a practical presentation about what is this mode, what does it do, how do you run it, and what are the pitfalls, pluses and minuses, and things like that. So it won't be focused on highly technical things. There's some pretty picky things to do with the software because of the state it's in. It's still a release candidate, but this will get us up and going and get the most out of it. Next slide, Paul. The reason this is titled Managing Expectations is because some of the discussion that took place on various chat boards and even on the WSJT-X list, things were getting completely out of control in terms of what people were expecting. They come to a new mode and they bring with them the baggage of their previous modes. So I'd like to start off talking about what it is and what it isn't. The fastest mode is Q65 15A, and what that means is 15 seconds with the A bandwidth. First of all, while it's got a nice fast turnaround, it is not FT8. If you're in a hurry, Q65 modes are not really for you. If you're looking for a ton of contacts in a short time, just in the high goodbye approach of FT8, Q65, that's not its purpose. When the band conditions are quite good, where E-skip makes the ionosphere like a mirror, Q65 15A will work, but not in a crowded band conditions. It doesn't do the same job that FT8 does in terms of being able to separate signals that are 1 hertz apart, and overlapping signals and just in time can be good. Next slide, please. Q65 30A is 30 seconds long. Again, it's not MSK 144. If there are a lot of meteors, MSK 144 is far faster to complete a QSO than Q65. Now, on the other hand, on 6 meters, if there are a lot of rocks, FT8 is not a good mode, as meteor scatter kills, FT8 decodes. So the point in looking at these various modes is every mode has a purpose. These modes were designed by K1JT to do specific jobs. Some of them got waylaid because they worked better in circumstances they did not anticipate. FT8 is a good example of that. It was not designed to be an HF mode, and look what happened. It turned out that it performed really well and took over. You're not going to see that with Q65. There is not a single mode that exists already that doesn't do better at its individual job than Q65 does. But Q65 can do some things that none of the other modes can do. Let's see. Next slide. Q65 was designed for scatter, and specifically ionoscatter. It can make exceptional decodes on very, very weak signals using a scatter off the ionosphere. Now, the interesting thing about Q65 is that it doesn't care what mode you're running. It will decode ESCIP, it will decode troposcatter, it will decode ionoscatter, which it was designed for, it will decode EME, it will decode ground wave. In other words, all these different propagation modes can be decoded by Q65. None of them wreck it, like some of the earlier JT65s, where if you got a meteor burst, the decode would be ruined, and that's certainly true with FT8. This particular picture is kind of an example of scatter, and when you have two stations looking toward each other, your signal is coming out in the form of a lobe or a triangle. Think of it that way, an inverted triangle. And where they intersect, there's a common scattering volume, a common scatter volume, and that's where you get the maximum reflection. That scattering can happen in the troposphere, where the limit in distance is only about 400 miles, or it can happen on an ionospheric level, where the distance can be 12, 13, maybe even 1,400 miles. You're using the D and the E layer for ionoscatter. The other thing is all these other modes tend to come and go. And by that, I mean, you have sporadic E openings, you have tropospheric ducting, you have meteor scatter. There's no meteors, doesn't work. Ionoscatter isn't like that. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It will also take advantage of any propagation that's available. But where it really shines is what I call in the no waiting mode. If you're running ionoscatter, you don't have to wait for an opening. Band's always open. The question is, do you have sufficient low noise level? Do you have sufficient power? And are you running the right mode to take advantage of it? So an important thing to consider with all of the Q65 modes is they don't need meteors or sporadic E to work. Next slide. Q6530A, which is the most common mode you will find on 50.275 on 6 meters, is far more sensitive than MSK144 and the other digital modes. It does not require meteors for 24/7, but it will take advantage of them if they're present. Now, when I say take advantage, they can help, but will Q6530A or any of the other modes, will they work better than MSK144 if there are meteors? No, it won't. If there's lots of meteors, the right mode is MSK144. Next slide. Q65 is not a plug and play mode. It's not like FT8 where you just turn it on and it all works. It requires some learning and some fine tuning to get peak performance out of it. Months of experimenting with early versions of Q65 have demonstrated the following. Without band enhancement like sporadic E, meteor trails, or tropoducting, it is not a typically a random mode. In other words, you don't get on and call CQ. If you do that, you're going to find you get almost no answers. Now, right now, there appears to be some extra interest on 50.275 with mode Q6530A-30A. There are people on almost every morning, and on weekends, they're on a lot longer. But it's certainly not like FT8, and it's certainly not like MSK144 in terms of operator density. The popularity of it is growing. People will come and get interested and then leave it, but it's not a CQ or random mode. When operator density increases dramatically, we probably will see Q6530A or catch on, and during E season, you might see Q65 15A, which is again 15 seconds long, catch on. But it's not a replacement for FT8. If we have a good E opening, we're going to be on FT8. It's a different purpose. Next. What can we expect for performance with Q65? What does a station need to be? Well-equipped stations running 100 watts to Yagis with low ambient noise can work consistently 1,000 miles at the best time of the day. 100 watts, best time of the day. With 700 watts or more, they can consistently work 1,000 miles any time of day. And that's using Q65-30A on 50.275. There's a reason I keep mentioning frequency. These modes cannot share the same band. We cannot have 120E and 30A working on the same band because 120E is about 5 times as wide, and they just can't share. They can't be decoded anyway, and they'll do nothing but QRM each other. So we're, for the present, trying to choose frequencies, watering holes, where Q65 30A, 30-second sequences with submode A runs on a 50.275 in the States. Q65 120E, which is 2 minutes long with an E submode, is on 50.235. Those are just watering holes. Nothing's hard and fast, but if you want activity, that's where you'll have to look for it. Well-equipped stations running less than 100 watts to Yagis with low local ambient noise can easily work 1,100 miles using mode Q65 120E on 6 meters. That's 120-second transmissions and sub-mode E, which is very broad. It's about 500 hertz wide. That mode is downright scary good. Most hams don't have the patience to wait for 2 minutes. Most hams are in much more of a hurry. If you're a patient person, you will determine that 120E on 6 meters is magic. I have consistently worked people from 700 to 1,200 or 1,170 miles consistently with almost 100% decodes. That is every sequence decoded at less than 25 watts on each end, and oftentimes less than 5 watts. And I'm going to show you some graphs of contacts where performance at under 5 watts has been in the 90% region without a band opening. 120E is remarkable, but most people don't have the patience for it. Next slide. I work at K1JT, the author of the program, nearly every morning at 1,000 miles running 600 watts. And that's just not working him, but decoding 90% of available sequences. And what we do is we will turn auto sequencing off and just send the same sequence, like he'll send TX4 and I'll send TX5. We will do that for 30 minutes or 45 minutes and see how many sequences are sent versus how many sequences are decoded. And what we have found is we're getting about 90% of available sequences are decoded running 600 watts on 6 meters at a distance of 1,000 miles. Then Jim and I got crazy and decided to play around, W7OUU, and we worked day after day after day at a distance of 1,070 miles, running less than 20 watts output on 6 meters, again, over a half-hour, 45-minute period. And the decoding is absolutely astonishing. You'll see some of the results in the stuff below. And this is not with stations that are super stations. I'm running a 5-element LFA at 60 feet, fed with half-inch hardline. And a lot of our early tests were running with me running nothing but the internal preamp on my Kenwood TS590SG. In the last couple of weeks, I picked up a used ARR gasket, and it's in the shack. And I put that on and turned the internal preamp off, and it's working even better. But still, I was having no trouble. what I have explained to people before who have come on various chat boards and said, well, it doesn't work for me. This doesn't work. If you're not able to get the results I've just presented, it's not the fault of the mode, something else that's wrong. Causes include, but are not limited to, and this is a big one, high local ambient noise. Many people I talk to and work have no idea how bad their local noise level is on 6 meters. They've never measured it. I consistently see certain stations from 8 to 15 dB down on their receive side, who originally said, my noise is low. Measurements show just the opposite. Their noise is terrible and they just don't know it. Not using the right power level or the right mode and mode settings for the path in question. This is an early stage of release candidate 1 of Q65. There are some real strange idiosyncrasies about the software and its settings. And so I'm going to cover some of that here that will get you going in the right direction. Once you understand how to use it, it works really well. Again, if you want plug and play, this mode is not it. Next setting, the slide rather. Setting realistic expectations for the Q65 suite of modes involves study, practice, and patience. Joe went to the trouble of producing a small PDF file that says understanding Q65 decodes. Virtually no one reads it. He produced another one called Getting Started in Q65. Very few people have read it. This is trying to take the place of it in a small way to get people going, but if you're interested in using the mode, it's a good idea to at least take a look at those documents, and they're on his Princeton website. I just want to emphasize that people come with a lot of baggage from prior modes. Q65 is not JT65, it is not QRA64, it is not FT8, and it is not MSK144. It is not point and shoot. It typically requires scheduling, and it always requires patience. Here's some examples of Q65 graphs, as it were. This is the fast graph, the wide graph of K5GZR, who's at 870 miles. And we are running Q65 30A, that's the 30-second mode, at 600 watts. And you can see it's just lighting up the wide graph. That's an exceptionally strong signal. And you could, if you looked at the actual decode, the signal strength would be around -10. Here, and that was the mode 30A. Now let's go to the next slide. This is mode 120E, the very, very sensitive but long 2-minute mode. And it's KB7IJ running 200 watts. And his signal level at this decode is -13.
There's lasagna in your fridge if you want it.
Which is very loud. -13 is a very strong signal. And of course, we discovered later on that 200 watts at this distance was silly when I can decode him at 5 watts. But that's how we learn. If you look at the bottom of that slide, first of all, you see the speckles, the distributed speckles from 1500 to 2300 hertz. Those are the different tones that are being scattered back to us. And each of those contributes to a decode. And down at the bottom, you will see an orange line with a peak and a red line underneath it with a peak. The red line is the sync of his signal. That is my sync to his decode to his signal. The orange line is called a multi-sync, and it would be showing for other stations in the band, a pass band, as well as my own or his own. So what that shows us is that one, he's very strong, and a very strong signal is producing a lot of speckles. And that's what we call them, sparkles or speckles. Okay, next slide. Here is, again, KB7IJ at 670 miles, running the 2-minute mode, 120E, running all of 5 watts. And his signal to noise ratio on this is -19. And you can see the speckles just at the bottom of the screen. There's a few on the right-hand side, the bottom of the display of the graph. There's a few in the middle, and there's a couple up top. But it's still producing a very strong red sync line. And the order, I'll cover the order of sensitivity of the display later that will explain how useful that red sync line can become. Next slide, please. This is again 5 watts, 120E, 2-minute mode. And this is a -21 decode. And that's there again to illustrate the relatively limited number of speckles. And yet look at that strong sync line. Well, it decoded beautifully at -21. How far can we go down and decode? -27, -28, maybe even a little more with message averaging, which we'll get into a little bit later. So it gets to the point where you don't see anything on the screen, no visible indication that there's a signal even there. And yet you'll see a strong sync line, and then a decode will follow. Now, when signals get really weak, beyond crazy weak, you'll see a sync line, a red sync line, but you won't get any decode, and you'll see no sparkles. But just keep in mind, this is this is not during a band opening. This is just pure scatter. And we're running 5 watts and going 670 miles with decodes at 100%. So this goes on for 5 or 10 minutes. I would have 5 to 10 decodes and never even skip one. It's ridiculous. Next slide. Again, KB7IJ, 2-minute mode, 5 watts, and there's a decode at -24 SNR. And you can see there's very little that you can discern there. Maybe a few sparkles at the beginning, just below this and to the right of the sync line. Nothing that you would hang your hat on. Yet look at the red sync line, very strong sync, and it decoded quite easily at -24. Just as a casual mention, you see the letters M, R, and 73. The 120E mode and some of the other longer modes have a way to send just fixed tones like the old was it JT-65? Anyway, whatever was being used for EME sent single tones for various parts of the QSO. This can do that too if you turn SH on, but quite frankly, there's no real need for it for the kind of work we're doing. But that's what those the M, the R, and the 73. There's a T, an M, an R, and a 73. That's what those are for, SH mode. And I think if Lance is here, W7GJ, he can explain that far better because I don't work EME. Next slide. This is again the 2-minute mode, running 4 watts. And what I really wanted to put this up here for is, first of all, there's some interference, just some noise that you can see in the system with those vertical red traces or red spots up in the graphic display. But what's important about this particular one is, notice it says -26 average Q33. And what that means is that during this particular sequence, I got a decode that was not a direct decode. Excuse me. It was the result of averaging 3 different messages, which this software does brilliantly. No matter what mode you run, it is capable of message averaging, and I'll be discussing that a little bit later. So what this did was, it missed 3 messages in a row. It skipped them. And then all of a sudden, the very next message came up with a Q33, and that says Q3 means I'm getting a grid and a call sign using AP decoding. And the second 3 says, I have taken the last 3 sequences that did not decode, put them together, and got a decode. And so that adds another approximate 3 dB of sensitivity when message averaging is invoked. And that happens automatically. You can't make it happen. The program decides when it can do an average. And if the signals are strong, it won't average at all. You'll never see it. You might think that averaging isn't even working. It's always working. It just isn't used if the signals are strong. And the AP decoding is so good that averaging takes place probably less than 5% of the time. Next slide, please. This is an example of 100 watts with WB4HIE, James out in North Carolina. We call that QRP when we're on the 60A mode. Or actually, I think this was 30A. I think I've mislabeled this. But this is a 100 watt signal with the band up a little bit. It's not like that. There's no meteors involved, but there's a little band enhancement going on now because 100 watts at that distance will not always produce the very bright sparkles you're seeing. But what's good about this display, it is a classic ionoscatter display. You see scattered, random sparkles. You don't see big bright blobs. Big bright blobs are meteor pinks. There aren't any on this. And this is 60A, and you can tell because it's only from 1500 to 700, 1700 hertz wide, as opposed to the E mode, which is 1500 to 2300, much, much wider. And again, if you look down at the graph, you will see the very strong red sync line. Next slide. This is this one's quite interesting. This is a QSO that I had with KB7IJ, where you can see the layout of the WSJT-X screen, and it shows the single period decodes on the left and any average decodes on the right. And you can look at this and see the QSO started at the very top. Maybe a bit hard to see, but at the very top is the initial call. And then he is transmitting to me, and it says Q3. And what that means is a priori AP decoding is taking place, or has taken place, and I got the call in the grid. And so each time there's a decode, you'll see that Q3 over and over again because it's getting the call in grid. If you look over on the right, however, at 1338 at the top one, which is about 5 sequences in, if you look at the left side at 1337, it did a skip. It didn't decode anything. But at 1338, it took that skip. Anytime it skips, it's still compiling data for the income or for the message averaging. Now, I want to say that again because it's a little strange. Even though a decode is skipped, not everything is lost. Part of it gets stored to be later used for income averaging. And if it gets enough samples, it will be able to create a properly decoded message. And that's exactly what happened over at the top at 1338 on the right-hand side. It says 1338.00 minus 20. And then at the very right edge, it says Q32. What does that mean? Q3 means I used AP decoding to get the call in the grid. And the 2 that follows says I used 2 messages to completely decode the message. I averaged 2 sequences. The next one down below that, 1344.00, if you look to the right, it says Q33, which means I used 3 sequences to create a decode. Well, if you look on the left-hand side at 1342, 43, and 45, see those 3 empty spaces? Those are skipped decodes. But during those spaces, it was compiling data to be used in message averaging. And those 3 blank skips resulted in this decode that says 1344 Q33. I used those 3 blank spaces. They had valid data in it, but not enough to decode until we put them together. And once they did the averaging, bingo, we got a decode. So each time you see a blank, don't assume, oh, I missed something. You missed a decode, but later it may result in a decode through message averaging, which is really a cool feature. Okay, next slide. Okay. This is an example of 120E, again, the 2-minute mode with KB7IJ running all of 3 watts. And this is at a distance of 670 miles. And if you look at it, you will see, let's see, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total sparks. That's it. In 2 minutes, 7 total sparks. What did I get out of it? Absolutely perfect decode at -20. It's truly remarkable. Next slide, please. This is another example of a -24 signal to noise ratio decode. Very little visual information available, but a strong sync line. The red line is very strong on a peak, and yet the waterfall is nearly invisible in terms of any meaningful data. And with any of these, you can't hear a thing if you're listening to the audio. And yet at a signal level of -24, it was a perfect decode. Notice the red sync line showing that sync has been detected. Next slide, please. And now we're going on to basic settings, how to set this thing up so it will actually do what you want it to do. And some of it's counterintuitive, so stick with me here. If you want to just generally monitor 50.275 for activity, which is where the majority of the activity will be at this point in the software's development, we're going to use mode Q65-30A. That's a 30-second TR and submode A. We're going to set decode to fast. That is, decode deep is not used. It doesn't do a thing for us, and it only slows things down. That's the current state of the software. So while it seems like decode should work better than decode fast, it doesn't. So set decode to fast. Enable averaging for general monitoring should be turned off. That's an anomaly of the software. It shouldn't work that way, but it does. KB7IJ discovered this, and we reported it to K1JT, and he has verified that in release candidate 1, if you're just going to monitor the band, you will get a greater number of decodes by turning enable averaging off. Underneath that decode menu, it says auto clear averaging. That should always be on whether you're using averaging or not. And then FTOL, you can set it to anything you like, but it's usually less than 50 Hertz. I use 20 Hertz. It has no effect while monitoring, no effect while monitoring at all. But in a QSO, it has a big effect, and I'll be discussing that in a little bit. So just to review, for 50.275, you run Q65-30A. Don't run another mode in there. Decode is fast. Enable averaging is off. Auto averaging is always on, so you don't have to play with it. And FTOL you can set anywhere you want, but it's better if you set it lower. Next slide. So if you're in a QSO, number one, if you're going to, as soon as you call someone, it fills in the DX call and grid. If you're going to schedule someone, before you even start the schedule, put in their DX call and their grid and hit generate messages. The reason you do that is it'll start a priori decoding immediately. So it'll pick up decodes faster in the beginning. So we're going to start with, for inside of QSO, you want enable averaging on. You'll pick up 2 to 3 dB of sensitivity. The cost for that is you won't monitor as many signals with enable averaging on, but it'll do better with the signal you're trying to work with. So in QSO, enable averaging on. Make sure your receiver is dead on the station you're trying to work. You can transmit anywhere you like, but the guy you're working has to be listening where you're transmitting. So make sure you're on each other's frequency, because when you narrow up your FTOL, you will miss decodes if you're not on frequency. And this is a comment from Joe K1JT. No mode is immune to QRM. With overlapping signals, Q65 will usually decode the one at slightly lower frequency first. You can often decode the one at a higher frequency by double clicking on it with FTOL small enough to exclude the lower one. So that's a little complicated, but what it really is saying is there can be some overlap. And if you want to look at the overlapping signal that did not decode, if you put your cursor over the left edge of the, we'll call it the offending signal, and double click there, it'll decode. And if it's decodable, it will show up. So running split works fine. You don't have to call people on their frequency. It's not necessary. Just make sure that your receiver is on the other guy's transmitter and his transmitter is on your receiver. And also remember, when in QSO, enable averaging to pick up the extra sensitivity. But if you're just looking for signals, monitor, turn enable averaging off. This will be fixed in release candidate 2, but in RC1 it's necessary. Next slide. When hunting for a particular station, pre-fill the DX call and grid info. Pre-fill it. That'll cause AP decoding to take place. Be sure to hit F4 to clear this info when going back to general monitoring. So if you're just gonna, you've just finished a QSO, you've had a great time, and you're done, hit F4 to clear that information out. What does FTOL do? It doesn't work the same way as it did in FT8 or MSK144. If set to narrow, as it should be, it prevents syncing on false Wi-Fi and LAN birdies, which will cause legitimate signals to fail to decode. So setting FTOL narrow helps. It also ensures that a signal close to the frequency will be the first one decoded. A way to describe how this software performs in general. From the lowest probability of a decode to the highest. If what you get is no sync line, you don't see a red sync line, or you don't see even an orange sync line. Again, the orange is the red is if you have a call entered. If you, so that's important. The orange is if you don't. It'll do both. But. So no sync line and no decode, that's as bad as it gets. So if you're trying to find someone, you've got their call entered and their grid entered, and you're not seeing a red sync line, and you're not getting a decode, either they aren't transmitting where you think they are, or propagation is just impossible. The next lowest level is you get a red sync line, but no decode. What that's telling you is that I've got enough information to detect that guy, there's a guy there calling, but it's not good enough to decode. It's close. And so that's what it's used for. If you get a red sync line, it's identifying a signal. It just can't decode it yet. That's a good sign. It's certainly better than the previous where you didn't get a sync line. Thirdly, you get a decode with the call and a grid entered. And then fourthly, you get a call, you get a decode with the call and grid and enabling average. So the most sensitive that you can get is decode with call and grid and enable average. That's as good as it can get. Um, Keep in mind, enabling averaging will decrease the number of decodes when just monitoring. It's very easy to get out of a QSO and forget, and you leave enable averaging on. That doesn't prevent the other in-pass band signals from decoding, but it's not as sensitive, so you'll miss some. And like I said, that's supposed to be fixed in RC2. Okay, next please. This is an example of how crazy 120E can be in terms of sensitivity. This is a QRP test I did with KB7IJ, and we were running no more than 5 watts and going lower. So we started out with about 5 watts, and by the time we get to the bottom, we're running 1 watt or less. And this is at a distance of 670 miles on 6 meters, no enhanced band conditions. And you will see that in the beginning, the signal is minus 24. At 1404, we showed minus 24. At 1408, we showed minus 19. And notice the decode, it says Q3. That means I used a priori advanced decoding, and I got message number 3, which is the call sign grid. So those were strong enough that we did not get any averaging. So they were straight copy. 1404, 1408, 1412, minus 24, minus 19, minus 21. Then notice at 1416 and 1420, we didn't get any decode, it skipped. Then we went to, then if we look down at the bottom here, so we skipped at 16 and 20. It's like, oh, geez, I lost the day. I didn't get any data. Wrong. We did get data. Because look at the very bottom of the screen where I copied what happened on the right side of the screen. At 1424, we got a Q33. And so what it did is it took the skip from 1416 and the skip from 1420 and the signal from the present at 1424 and took those 3 sequences, did a message averaging, and got a minus 26 decode at a very low power level. So we saw one average that happened as a result of 2 skipped sequences, and then the third sequence is where the average was printed. So when we look at this again, Q33 means 3 messages were averaged to get this low minus 26 SNR decode. Q3 by itself means a priori or AP decoding was available and used. 2 digits means message averaging and the AP decoding. Enable averaging will decrease the number of decodes when just monitoring. I know I keep harping at that, but I can tell you the number of times during a 2 or 3 hour period of messing around that I found myself forgetting to turn off enable averaging when I was just monitoring the band was scary. So it's either me alone or everybody's going to have this problem. Next slide. This is a QRP test run by KB7IJ and I running 120E low wideband 2-minute long testing on 50.235. Again, the distance is 670 miles. And what I did here is I went back and we were running sliding power tests. And you can see what happened. The initial, and while it's saying 73, it's saying that because we decided to fix our TXs so we could run minute after minute after minute without having to hit auto sequence. So, and that's the recommended process for testing that K1JT Joe put out. So at 1248, we have a minus 18 decode at 10 watts with no averaging, just AP. At 1252, we have the decode, again, minus 17, 10 watts. At 1256, we got a minus 17 at 5 watts. Now, okay, you could say, well, how come that happened? Well, the band goes up and down. The number of reflections off the discontinuities in the in the E layer in the ionosphere. Those things are constantly in a state of flux. So it's not a band opening, it's just the availability of little discontinuities. So 5 watts, and we're still at minus 17. Keep in mind, our threshold is minus 27 or worse. At 1304 to 1308, Rich and I decided that we were going to stop and quickly run over and have a contact on the XW2F satellite on single sideband, which we did. So while it showed up as a skip, it wasn't a true skip because there was no data coming in either. At 1312, we resumed at 5 watts, and it was minus 22, so the band had gone down a little bit. At 1312, at 1316, we went to 3 watts, and we were still at minus 24. 1320, 3 watts, minus 26. 1324, also 3 watts, minus 22. 1328, 2 watts, minus 24. 1332, minus 21 at 2 watts. Then we had 2 sequences in a row, 1 at 2 watts and 2 at 1 watt, where we got no decode whatsoever and no average. So the signal was so low during those 3 sequences. And that's why I say the SNR is not always a true measure. There just wasn't anything there to decode. And we didn't get an average either. So there are circumstances where there's no guarantee that every time you get a no decode that it's going to contribute to average. It will a lot, but not always. But then out of the blue at the very end, the band came up a little bit. There were more discontinuities to work with. And I can tell you from looking at the waterfall, there was no meteor pattern, it was straight scatter. All of a sudden, we got a decode at minus 28 with 1 watt, 670 miles, 670 miles, 1 watt on 6 meters. But again, we're having to wait for 2 minutes on each transmission. So this is not for the impatient instant gratification crew. Next slide, please. This is the shack of KB7IJ. And while this contact was going on, if you will look at his Array Solutions power meter on the left-hand side, that's 1100 milliwatts. That's what we were running when we did that test. His shack's a lot neater than mine. Okay, next slide. This is from W7GJ, and is Lance here so he can make some comments on this?
If you're Lance.
I am here.
There you go.
Okay. Lance, go ahead and make some comments about the EMA side because you are far more knowledgeable about it than I am.
Okay, well, as Hasan has mentioned, I also have been testing out Q65 over the last few months, and I've been testing it on EME. And the development team hopes that Q65 will now replace JT65, which has been the EME mode. And at this point, there are a lot of things that haven't been fully developed in this release candidate version of 2.4, which is out now. But we've still been playing around with it on EME, and Joe feels pretty comfortable or confident that it is, in fact, as sensitive as JT65. What I don't know yet is whether or not it will work in pile-ups as well as JT65 when I go on EME expeditions on 6 meters, because you can't see the signals as well. However, here's an example. I was on 2 meters tonight before the Zoom conferences that I had. And oh, let's see. You can't see my screen, can you? So anyway, you can see at the bottom of the waterfall, you can see the little red blip, which is the signal at the top of the screen, the top of the waterfall that I'm working right now. And you can see I have everything slowed down dramatically. This is the 60-second mode period sequence mode, Q65-60A. And I slow the waterfall down over here at the bottom of the waterfall where it says N average 20. You can barely see that. I don't know if you can. You may have to blow that up on your screen to see the details, but that gives you a lot more definition in the actual signal that's being sent. And so that's why in the top of the screen, they're at something like 1650 hertz or something. You can see a range of signals across there, and you can see the sync trace itself where the red spike is. And you can only do that because I have everything slowed down so much so that I can visually see it in the most sensitive mode. Because obviously I'm working EME, which is everything has to be very, very sensitive. You can see over here. You can see. I don't know if you could blow it up or not, but I don't seem to be able to blow it up on my screen when I look at it. But anyway, there are like several stations that I completed with there that are shown, and it has averaged a few of them. The average thing doesn't really work very well right now because if people are sending reports and they change over the course of a contact, then the average is just thrown out. I mean, it doesn't average properly, so you can't. Right now, it's recommended for the weak signals that on EME anyway, that you don't use the average because of that, unless you know that they're sending. You're only expecting Rogers or 73s or something that will be the same each sequence. But anyway, so does anybody have any questions about its use on EME? I've got some schedules, one coming up tonight with a new country on 2 meters, and then tomorrow night, a new one on 6 meters. And I'm going to be using Q65-120A, which gives me 3 more extra dB. So if JT65A is roughly equivalent, at least according to Joe, maybe even a Q65-60A is maybe a little bit better than JT65A, then I should be able to get a solid 3 dB by doubling the length and going to the 2-minute sequences. So that's what I'm going to be doing on tonight and on 6 meters tomorrow night to try for these low power contacts with new countries.
Lance,
yes.
Lance, do you normally use Ping Jockey EME1? Is that where people might look to see when you're going to be on?
On 2 meters, they use that. On 6 meters, the real-time coordinating is done on the ON4KST EME chat page.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Tonight I was on 2 meters, and I just wanted to let people know I was on 107 calling CQ, and every once in a while I'd announce that on the chat page, and I got calls from, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stations that I worked in the hour before my Zoom meeting. In fact, one of them is on here tonight. W5EME is on here tonight. Thank you for the contact. I think it was his first Q65 contact. So it is because there were a number of stations on Q65 on 2 meters. So despite the fact that the program really isn't, isn't gelled yet. But it's coming right along, and they're taking a lot of feedback and wave files and fine tuning the features so that it'll be a little bit easier than on the release candidate 2, the next version that comes out. And I'm putting together a quick start, or how to get set up on Q65 for EME page, just like I did for JT65. But I'm holding off a little bit on that because everything is in flux so much. So many of these little features don't work quite right. There's a shorthand message on here that doesn't really apply for VHF EME. It's only used for sending messages on microwave, and they don't count anyway for signal reports. So there are little things like that that are going to be changing, I'm sure, in the next version.
Okay, let's see. Lance, I've got one other thing I want to cover here in the before we go to Q&A. One other thing I want to cover about the feature in the software, and then a couple of other what I call nits and bits, and then we can go to Q&A from everybody. Paul, if you could put the QSO with averaging graphic up that shows all of the exchanges with KB7IJ and I, where we had the signal levels, and it shows the whole screen.
I'm just trying to figure out which one that was. I'm just
Oh,
looking.
it's back about five or so. Let's
So.
see. I'll count for you. Hang on. Okay. If we use W7GJ's page as the start,
Yeah.
go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 9 up, and you should see the page that says QSO with averaging, and it's got the KB7IJ on the left side with orange, and on the right side blue and orange, and it's a standard WSJT-X screen.
Okay, I got it, I think. Let's see if I can get there from here.
All right.
Yeah. Let's see. Is that it?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. If you will, the last feature I wanted to point out is if you look at the very bottom of the screen, on the left-hand side, it says receiving, and then Q65 30A Bodner, last TX, and then there's 2 little numbers. It's a window. It's a dual window. There's a 1 and a 4. The way that we couldn't figure out what that was about until Rich and I played with it for about an hour. And what that is if you're in a QSO, one of those 2 numbers, either the left one, the 1, or the 4, depending upon which sequence you're transmitting, first or second, will increment every time it skips a decode. So if you have a decode skip, it starts out at 0 and 0. And if you have a decode skip, it'll say 1 and 0. Another decode skip, it'll say 2 and 0. Another decode skip, it'll say 3 and 0. And then on the fourth sequence, if it does a decode, it'll reset to 0, 0. So if it does a decode on the left side with no averaging, or the right side with averaging, it'll reset it to 0, 0. Now what that is really telling you is how many frames were skipped before I got a decode. So that's all that does, and it's not that important, except I saw earlier today while running with Rich, I got a decode of Q38, and what that means is it took the previous 7 sequences plus the current sequence. It took all of those to create 1 decode, and so it was reading 8, and after that average decode, it reset it to 0. So that's what those numbers mean down there. Only one of the two numbers means anything to you while you're running, because you'll either be the left number that's incrementing on skips or the right number, depending upon whether you're transmitting first or transmitting second. That's the meaning of those two. The other thing I wanted to cover, let's see here. Bring that up and not mess it up. All right. I talked about the two little windows. Those are the skip sequence counter. A skip decode does not mean that nothing was accomplished. It could be building data that will be used subsequently for message averaging. As Lance said, this is a work in progress. Some things don't work right. Auto sequence doesn't always start properly. Frequencies are watering holes at the moment. They're set up for testing in the USA. Feel free to do your own thing when scheduling. Do not run Q6530A and Q65-120E on the same frequency. They are not compatible. 275 is for 30A, 235 is for 120E in the USA. The idea is not to share the same passband as they aren't compatible. With this software, crashes are not uncommon. They will happen. Be sure after you've had a crash to look for orphaned JT9 processes with the task manager. It'll crash and yet there'll be a process running called JT9. If you try to restart the software at that point, you'll get an error. When you get that error, go into task manager and look for JT9 as a process. Find it, terminate it, and then it will run just fine. SNR reports are not perfect. They're not reliable, but they are useful. They're being fine-tuned. And then we had the comments by Lance. So at this point, that's about all that we can provide. I would like to turn it over to Jim W7OUU for any comments he might have, and then we can start taking any questions that might be had.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to do a demo too here, Hasan. We're going to.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Go ahead.
So yeah, let me just show you the demo, and then this is may or may not be the right way to do things, but we're going to try anyway.
Absolutely, go for it.
All right, I guess go down to the bottom here. Okay, so let me make a couple of switches here. I'm going to move something over into the shared screen. See if you can see that. Ta-da! And if I can make it bigger, it would even be better. Well, let me try it on a different screen here, and I can just change it around once I can figure out how to do stuff. There we go. All right, I'm going to change the share here for a second. And it should be this screen right here. How's that? Can everyone see it?
You bet.
Yeah, that's better.
Looks
Good. All right, so Bill is at the other end. I'm going to go second on this thing, and he's going to transmit and see if I can decode him here. By the way, my antenna's out east, towards the east, and I see a signal. Oh, he's really strong. God, I thought you were running QRP, Bill.
A couple watts.
Well, cool. There he goes. So there's the decode on him. He's +1. And I'm going to go on here, and I'm going to be basically, see if I can get him on here.
I think you're fine. Just wait for transmit.
Yeah, I think you're right. By the way, we're just doing 15 seconds here just for time.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
What are these artifacts out on the right-hand side over there? Are those reflections off the mountains around you?
Yeah, those are probably off the buildings downtown. I'm running, as you can see my output power here, it says 0. I've got it tied right down low.
It's magic.
Yeah, I got I turned it off, turned off my output power, so it's
Yeah,
whatever.
wait a minute. You're +9 and I'm +1. You're clearly running a lot more power.
Yeah, I've got nothing, and my antenna's pointing into the downtown area, about 9 degrees to what you are, so you shouldn't. I shouldn't
Background,
hear you.
background noise level will change the SNR.
That's true. I got a lot of noise downtown right now with the snow falling on the power lines. Oh. And there we go. We worked them. Hooray, now it's gonna say, I don't understand Q65.
Oh, you're gonna have to move up on Squaw Mountain. That's all there.
Squaw Mountain, yeah.
Hey, Paul, just
Yes,
for the
sir.
fun of it, since that worked, and that was fine, why don't we just go to the 30-second? I mean, we don't need to, but let's change the TR to 30-second and do it again.
Okay, we can go, I'm gonna move it up to 30 seconds. Here we go.
And notice that the red line got a lot shorter at the top.
yes,
The width of the signal is narrower, or the area covered.
that's good to know. All right, here's, you can see his stuff from coming up there. You got some signal coming in here.
Yes, sir.
He's still strong, Bill, and I tried to diminish you as much as I could. Oh, I need to hit enable TX or not yet now. It's a long decode.
Yeah, click on my call. Click on it when yeah, click on that.
Let's see if it gets me in there. Yeah, it got it in time. Yeah. If you like to watch paint dry, this is great.
By the way, Paul, you're like S5 here right now.
No, I can't do much else. Like I said, I got no power coming out of this amplifier. Amplifier is off, actually. It's just going through there. Let me try to.
Why is it showing FT8 and Q65 on the bottom of WSJT?
Here, I dropped my power some more. I actually found a way to decrease.
Well, it's because Paul's on the, I think he's on his FT8 configuration, but he changed the mode to Q65.
Oh yeah. Don't worry about that. It's the configuration I had up there. I don't have a configuration for Q65 yet. Here, I just dropped my power down some more. You should have some trouble hearing me now, Bill. Tim.
Yeah, well, very strong on the waterfall, but you're not moving the S meter anymore.
Good. All right. Try to keep that S meter not moving. Just pretend this is coming off the moon.
While we're waiting, did you notice that Hasan had his in dark mode?
Yes, I do.
He's a dark guy.
Yeah, very. A lot easier on the eyes to run dark mode for me.
Did you get a decode on me at all, Bill?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, even though I'm running no watts. It says 0. So it's the best I could do. -1 is a report.
Yeah, I just actually finally turned my antenna completely away from you. So that reduces the signal strength, of course, but
Yeah.
still, you know,
We're-
beautiful on the waterfall.
Yeah, well, this is just for demonstration purposes, so you kind of see what's going on. You can see the difference in colors and everything else that's there.
Yeah, one thing to note is that waterfall you're seeing on the WSJT-X fast graph, that is horrendously strong signals. What you should be seeing with ionoscatter will be sparkles of white and dimmer than white is more typical, like graphs I was showing. This particular display you're showing here is outrageously strong. And something to keep in mind, we have noticed that some really loud signals like 20/9 won't even decode because they're too strong.
Well, I guess I can put my amplifier away. All right, good guys. I think this is a good demonstration. Any questions on what I just did? Guess you got it all. All righty, let me switch over to the Q&A and go back over here. I guess I can stop this here.
Yeah, by the way, Paul, I have my power turned all the way down on the radio right now, and I'm pointing away from you.
And I see you on the waterfall.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it should look like.
Let's just let it decode and see if.
There it is. It decoded. I didn't answer you, but
That's my 7600 power set all the way to minimum. And my antenna is pointed, totally in the opposite direction to Paul at this point.
Yes, and that's a more classical display of what the mode should look like.
yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, next time we do a demo, we'll start here.
Yeah, I can see your CQing again. And I have a lot of noise here too, so that's
Well, see, that's an interesting thing you can do with Q65 like this, is you can set your power levels the same and point at each other, and then observe the difference in SNR. And if I'm reporting a much better SNR than you are, that means one thing: your ambient noise is higher than mine.
yeah, I'm just gonna try to answer them here and see if it, but yeah, you're right. The red line is I was trying to look for the sync line. I guess, where would I get that?
You got to turn that on. If you go to the bottom of the waterfall screen, there is a setting where it says cumulative. Click there and change it to Q65 sync. There you go. Now it'll do it.
See, I didn't know that. I just learned something else.
That's why I get the big bucks.
Exactly.
How do you bring that up again, Hasan?
Okay, just at the bottom of the waterfall, there's a section that says cumulative. It's a drop-down menu. If you click there for Q65, you should select Q65 sync. I have a different configuration for every mode for this purpose, so I don't have to change settings. So I have a configuration for FT8, a configuration for MSK144, a configuration for WSPR, a configuration for Q65. That's why they put that configuration menu in there, is so we could get set for maximum performance and not have to change settings. Because what I found is we constantly forget what our settings are.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And there's the red line.
Yep. There's an orange line and a red line. The orange line is the wideband sync called multi-sync, and the red line is the sync on the station you're working.
Well, there you go. Real-time demo. And I learned somewhere, and this is Q2 beside his decode there. So
Sending you the RRR right now, I think.
I see it. I just got it there, and there's the Q3. It says.
Yep, because that means it got the call, the grid, and the RRR.
And there's a
Log it.
What's the DT over on the right-hand side mean?
That is the difference in time between you two. It's the same thing as on the water on the table on the left screen. It's the difference in timing.
Okay.
So, you know, you're within what, a tenth of a second?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, it worked great. That was pretty cool.
Well, let's see if we've got some comments from Jim. Like to make some observations. W7OUU, because he was involved in this testing, and then perhaps we can go to Q&A.
Hey guys, well, here's my take on it. I think it's got some tremendous possibilities. For one, and number two, I don't believe it's going to be a mode for the masses, so to speak.
Correct.
However, it may become the desired mode on EME if it does in fact replace JT65. I think it has some other possibilities too, rather than just ionoscatter. I think it may be a usable mode for just weak signal in close. And when I say in close, I'm thinking of 150, 200 miles, rovers, this kind of thing. Some of the guys up in the PNW I know are a little excited about it and maybe trying it this coming summer. I'm going out on a couple of roves this summer, and for sure I'll be experimenting with it. My favorite mode is 120E. I've had the most success actually with 120E, particularly with low power. When you're running a kilowatt, that changes things a lot. But what I find exciting about it is that you can use this thing all day long. You don't, most of us dedicated meteor scatter guys are, we're on every morning. I'm on every morning. And, but this gives me something to do, during the day, except during E season, of course. I think the jury's out on how it's going to be taken. I think that it's got some great possibilities. It's not for the guy that's looking for an instant gratification. I don't think it's going to get there, but it's an exciting mode. I'm excited about it because I can see some possibilities with it. But the only way we're going to find out is let's get on and let's play with it and see what happens. But the testing that Hasan and I did, I mean, I'm running an FT991A. I turned it all the way down to nothing. I mean, it wouldn't go any lower, and Hasan was still decoding me like gangbusters. So it's got some great possibilities. And Hasan, thank you so much. You did a fantastic job, and I will continue to work you in the morning.
Well, I appreciate that. Anybody that's ever worked me, I want you all to know that I always like it when somebody calls again and again and again, because I'm interested in propagation. I'm interested in saying hi. And so I'm not one of these people who say, oh, we've worked before, there's no point in talking to this person. I want to work you every time. I work people every day, and it's a pleasure because I've been a propagation freak since I was a little kid, since I was 16 and got my license. And I made my first HF contact when I saw the signal bounce across the ionosphere and come down in Brazil. And I thought, wow, that feeling's never left me. And now, yeah.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
On meteor scatter, if you hear me calling CQ, answer me. I don't care how many times I've worked you, because on meteor scatter, I mean, I worked Larry every morning N0AN. I don't know how many times. I think I worked him every day so far.
I saw you this morning.
Yeah, and if particularly on meteor scatter, I just want to make this comment because I know I've got a bunch of VHFers out there, and a lot of you guys in the Midwest. And if you're out at 1,200 miles, I can work you. I mean, I've worked a ton of guys out at 1,100, 1,200, 1,250 miles running 100 watts of short Yagis on 2 meters. My point is this: if you hear me, you decode me, call me. I don't care how many times I've worked you, call me. I will. Every meteor scatter contact is different, even though it's with the same station. God bless KS7S down in Arizona before Jim passed away. I worked him 597 times. And every contact was different. Wow. So, if you hear me on in the morning and I'm pointed east, give me a call. Unless you just, you don't want to talk to me. I don't care, but give me a call.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. And it's all about propagation. Every contact on 6 meters is different. And to watch what this has done, what Q65 has done, is given us a real-time capability to watch signal levels vary by the amount of reflections taking place, the discontinuities, and also the where we're pointed and everything else. So it's callers are always welcome. I'm still active on MSK 144, but I've been very busy with Q65 because I'm trying to learn a new mode and see what it can do. But let's see if there's questions. If we can
Hey, Hasan, you should talk about the about like rovers using this as well, right? For rare grids.
absolutely. Absolutely, a very important point. I made it earlier, but I might have glossed over it a bit. This is a fill-in mode. It will cover any distance up to the limit of double hops and triple hops. We haven't tested it for that yet, but I don't see any reason that wouldn't work. But let's just say, okay, 1,400 miles, fine. But it covers everything. There's no dead space because for the first 200 miles, the first 300 miles, you can work ground wave or tropoducting. For the next several hundred miles, you can work troposcatter. For the next several hundred miles, you can work ionoscatter. So there is no real limit. Like with MSK 144, you can work a little ground wave. It's not great, but you can work a little. But there's this big vacuum from about 400 miles down to 200 miles. You're not going to get anything. Well, this can fill in with no effort whatever. It will be able to do some really amazing things. In fact, I had somebody tell me that when it comes down to getting that last tough grid for FMMA or FFMA, that 120E will be a game changer because they'll be able to fill in those last difficult grids with some ease instead of having to go nuts. So a lot of potential here. It isn't for the masses, but every mode has a purpose. And this Q65 has some amazing things that it can do. It'll
Those
never
guys
be
that
after.
are those guys that are after FFMA, that 200 to 400 mile range is the toughest range. And I really do think that this mode will enhance that immensely.
Oh, dramatically. There's no doubt about it.
Hey, Jim
okay, how
and
about-
Hasan,
Yes.
Jim just mentioned something. I'm relatively new into the 6 meter, just got my general again back in December. And of course they're spending my money really well. Trust me. LFAs, amps, we're going crazy. But the comment I wanted to make was I wanted to get used to this Q65. So I pointed my LFA south and just let it run Q30. And I had a contact out of the blue. I had no idea anybody was out there. 180 miles, 182 miles to Medford from Dallas, Oregon. Answered my CQ and we had a full QSO, no skips whatsoever, 182 miles. So you said the 200 to 400 range, this will be great. And when I do my roving in June at Charlie November 93, I will be doing some definitely, this Q65. It looks like it'll be really good.
Right. And something remarkable about that is you have the ability to make choices of modes. So if you get into a situation where Q65 30A on 50.275 won't work, have the people exercise some patience and go to Q65 120 Echo at 2 minutes. And I'm prepared to guarantee you that it will work without any trouble at all. When Jim and I first did the testing and we started running our power down and down and down and down and down, after a while, Jim typed to me because we were chatting. He typed to me and said, "This is magic. It's ridiculous." And that's exactly right. But you have to be patient. You got to be willing to go the 2 minute sequences when things.
And one further thing I just wanted to mention, I want to thank you and Jim, first of all, because I am new. I'm learning a whole lot from you guys, everybody else here too. Thank you for being here. It's great what you're doing because this is going to be a game changer for a lot of people.
Hey, Mark, We're just letting you build your bank account back up.
I got a rotor coming. I got to get cable. It never ends.
Hasan, where do folks hang out on reflectors? At Ping Jockey and ON4 KST or?
Actually, if you're looking for discussion and help, there's a whole bunch of us that hang out there's a bunch of people that hang out on Slack, and then there's a bunch of us that hang on a Chatango group called Morning Mayhem. And that's where KB7IJ and myself and K5GZR, WB4HIE, there's a whole bunch of us that are we're involved in meteor scatter, we're involved in Q65, and some of us are involved in satellite. So that's another area where that's a watering hole that I'm always in.
Where is Morning Mayhem? Is that online somewhere?
It's in chat. It's in a chat group called Chatango. I can, if you send me an email off my QRZ address, I will give you the address to Morning Mayhem, because we do a lot of helping right there on the spot, because you can type back. Basically, the address is the word, all one word, Morning Mayhem, MORNINGMAYHEM .chatango, CHATANGO.com. That is our group, and if you go there, we'll all be there. We're there every morning. It's like a coffee clutch.
Okay, one other question is related to probably moonbounce, but I'm just getting set up to do, I'll call it not quite QRP on 1.25 meters. What's the best chat room to try to get a hold of people for that? Would that be Slack, or I'm already on Slack?
No, I think it's the KS ON, what it is, KST.
Okay.
Son, you might be interested to know that I listened in on the test between you and Jim. Another thing is that I used to, when I was back in the late 50s, early 60s, I used to work K9 EID across Missouri, and we would correlate signal strengths with the weather. And that was on AM, some single sideband, and CW.
Oh yeah, that's remarkable.
Hi, Hasan. Long time no see. Actually, I never seen you.
Oh, hey, Chris, how you doing?
Chatted with you a lot. I just thought I'd mention to you guys in the last 5 minutes, I'm doing Q65 15 seconds to middle of Manitoba on UHF. So it works all the way up to there.
Another thing, Hasan, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, that's it. That's all I had to go for it, Jack.
That is way cool, Chris.
I worked about 4 or 5 XE stations on ES and Q65 the other night.
Yeah, XC2OR has been on frequently, and there's a couple of other guys too. They're actually XC2OR is about the only one that's in range for me without band enhancement, but they are showing up. And as far as the comment on Q65 15A, keep in mind that that is the least sensitive of the modes. So when the band is open, it's going to be fine. But if you want optimum performance, that's why you're seeing the default setting for 6 meters is Q65.30A because it's 3 dB more sensitive than 15, but it's not as difficult as 120, which is so much longer.
Can
Thank you.
120 be run on submode A, or is that specifically for E?
We ran a bunch of tests, and we found that 120 Echo was the best of the 120 A, B, C. In other words, we don't know why, and in fact, even Joe doesn't know why. But we ran a bunch of tests to see where we got the maximum number of decodes at the lowest power. And KB7IJ and I did this a lot. And what we found is, for some reason, 120E works better than 120A, B, or C. So,
Hasan?
I have a theory on that.
A, B, C, D, and E. What are they?
Oh, those are the various widths that involve the spread of the signal. So if you look at it's the amount of spreading they'll tolerate, and the width. So if you change from A to E, the actual bandwidth that you're transmitting changes. So
they're called they're sub-mode letters. That's the
yes,
selection
yes,
to the right of the receive
correct.
frequency.
Right. That's exactly right. And all I can tell you is that our experiment showed for 6 meters and the propagation that we're exposed to, we found 120E to be the best for us. And that's why I didn't mention the other ones, because I didn't want to confuse anybody. But they all have their purpose. I'm surprised there isn't more 120E run off the moon. But like I said, some of the theoretical concerns indicated that 120C should be plenty wide for 6 meters in our normal use. But it wasn't true, because 120E was producing more decodes. And I can't tell you why, but I'm not running 120C when I know E works better.
Bill, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm thinking one of the issues that happens, and the problem, it probably goes back to, as you go up or longer in time, for some reason it compresses the bandwidth. So if you go from say 30A to 120A, the bandwidth gets compressed on the signal. And I'm thinking what happens is it gets so close together that if there are any meteors mixed into it, the mechanism to reject the meteor scatter pings probably becomes less active. So by going to E, it spreads it back out a whole bunch again, and you gain the sensitivity of both the longer bit times and the longer or the wider bandwidth, so that it can more differentiate between the signals, and you don't have the meteors become an issue. And at 120 seconds, that's a long time to not have a meteor scatter ping in there. So it's good to have the best immunity you can from it.
It also gives you a lot of time to go get a cup of coffee.
So we should be using E when we're on 120, and A definitely for 15 seconds kind of thing?
Yeah, 15A, 30A, and 120E are the primary ones that I would be using, unless you're involved in a lot of experimentation, because W7VD and K2DRH have been doing a lot of experimenting on 2 meters, and they have found that I think it was 60B is what they were using that produced the most decode. So a lot of this is very experimental at this point.
Well, maybe I should switch to that right now. I'm trying to get these guys. They're getting me -11, -12 in Manitoba right now, but so 60B might be a chance.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is if the signals are strong, stay with the shortest transmission rate. Which
Well, some guys are, but some guys with not as good a station. I'm working V4MA. I think you might know, some of you guys might know Barry in Manitoba. He's got a good station, but some of the other guys are struggling. So maybe I suggest going to 60B here in a minute. That's it. This is really interesting stuff, Hasan. Thank you for doing all the work, and Jim, and of course Joe Taylor. Wow, that's
yeah.
You guys are working hard. I appreciate it.
I have a question about 6 meter EME, if I can. This is Sid, K5XI, and maybe a question more appropriate for Lance, but I'm wondering the current impressions about the extent to which Q65 may replace JT65A for 6 meter EME, and are people using the 60A flavor of Q65 for 6 meter EME or 120E?
No, he's using, if Lance is here, he can answer. Otherwise, I'll tell you what it was like when I tried to work him. He was running 60A, Q65 60A, and he copied me, and I don't have any elevation, and I've just got, 700, or would have been about 700 watts to my 5-element LFA at the horizon, and he decoded me twice. I
That's the
did not have a
driver.
good. What?
That's your
I missed
driver.
that.
That's your driver that you're
It's the
using,
driver.
Hasan. Don't kid us. We know.
Oh, well, in any case, I didn't have my good preamp on, and also I've got some local noise, so I didn't expect to really hear him. The fact that he decoded me, I was astounded. He also decoded KB7IJ, doing the same thing, and Rich's noise is so high, he didn't hear him either.
Thanks.
Sid, most of our testing has been with the 60A, and I know N0TB is on here, and he's participated in a bunch of tests too. We don't really know yet because the next couple days are really the best days of the month for 6-meter EME. So it'll be interesting to see what people wind up doing. Frankly, on weak signals, you know, for decades, the standard for EME was 2-minute sequences on CW. And so it doesn't bother me to run 2 minutes if I have to with a weak signal, with a weak station. And that's what I'm going to do tonight in 45 minutes and also tomorrow night then also. So, well, but I think it's going to mostly be probably 60 seconds. We'll see. It seems to be comparable in terms of sensitivity to JT65 if the stations are running one-on-one. And so if you set up a sched, I think you're just as well to use Q65. But, you know, right now there are quite a few little tweaks that you have to do to get things working optimum. And that'll improve too as the releases come out further.
Are you doing the QSOs on 5190 or somewhere else?
Well, we did all our testing on 50.211. I think I'm going to run my contacts on 190 if it's open. But we'll arrange at the time on the ON4KST 6-meter chat page.
Thanks.
Have you tried to run the E sub mode on 120E off the moon yet, Lance?
No, I have not. The most sensitive modes are going to be the narrowest ones. So the A is definitely the mode to be using for EME.
Okay.
Any other questions, guys, before I shut her down?
How to know what letter are you using when I am monitoring the on 275?
Okay, Rafa, you should be running Q65 30 alpha submode A, 30-second submode A.
But what is the difference between A, B, C, D, or E?
That's a very complicated thing, but no one is running anything other than 30A on 50.275.
Oh, okay.
The basic difference is that the higher the letter is, the farther apart the tones are spaced. So they're easier for the decoder to identify specific tones in their slots. The negative side is that obviously as you go wider, it takes up more bandwidth. So you have to stay as narrow as you can when you're trying to share a specific frequency with people at the low end or the middle end and whatever. You get to a high letter and you're taking up half of that 3 kilohertz or more than half of the 3 kilohertz space that a normal radio has.
It would also let in more noise.
Well, okay. The point is the higher the letter, the more space you take up.
Yeah, the thing we have to consider is noise in these digital modes is not the same as noise in the typical SNR measurements we do on HF. There's other things that are taking place, because otherwise we would be narrowing up our passband using these digital modes. And Joe has specifically said, do not do that. You'll ruin your decoding. So it's a little different in these digital modes, that the passband needs to be wide for the decoders to operate at the best efficiency.
All right, well, that's great, guys, and good question, Rafa. And we'll have a recording of this ready for tomorrow. And thanks for everybody joining us tonight, and especially thanks to Hasan, Jim, and Lance, and all the other questions you guys gave us.
Ask one more question.
Okay, slide one more.
Sorry. Dave, KFAQL in Michigan. Hasan, we talked about these are all arranged contacts, but then you talked about rovers in contests. I am a rover. How would I practically use this in a contest as a rover?
Well, first of all, you'd for the roving contacts that are like, I've just got to get this guy worked. You're going to have to arrange that using your cell phone and texting and stuff. And then you go to 120E and you'll probably have success. But for, hey guys, I'm going out here and you might be looking at that point, you just go to Q65 30A on 50.275, and people know that they're looking for you, and they'll be spread out calling you, and you will see them.
Okay, and how do we avoid interfering with each other?
We're not sure what kind of interference there is going to be. I see 4 or 5 people at a time without difficulty, and some overlap seems to be tolerated, but we won't know for sure until we actually do it. It's so early that we're all in a state of marveling at what it can do. We haven't figured out the stuff that it doesn't do well yet.
Well, and there's a lot of bandwidth on 6 meters for sure. There's lots of space. So if you wanted to pick some frequency that's not a normal watering hole frequency and announce that as your frequency, like 350 or 330 or something like that, that's a reasonable suggestion for somebody that's going to be out roving.
Hasan.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hasan, this is Jim. As a rover, I always, well in advance before I go on the rove, let guys know what grids I'm going to be in, and if I have, and what frequencies I'm going to be on, using what mode, and if I have internet connectivity, VSL, then that's another way to let everybody know. There is a Slack page actually for rovers, and I would highly recommend. I'll use it if I have internet connectivity, but where we're sitting now with this mode, and as he pointed out, the band being 4 megahertz wide. Let's be honest, guys. How much of that are we using? Not near enough. So, I don't think finding a frequency on 6 meters is going to be an issue. So, I mean, if you want to go off to, 50.312 or, 262 or wherever you want to go, that's going to be my plan anyway.
I think a more central question for a lot of rovers is going to be, once I get a frequency picked, and it easily quite could be 275 without difficulty, how many signals are we going to see at a time? And because they know we're there, and are there going to be issues? And my answer to that is, I hope we try it so we can find out, because I don't know.
It's just, people just spread out and use different offsets. You can get 20 stations in there not overlapping at all. From 200 to 2200 hertz, and if they're 50 hertz wide, you can just space out all the way across the band, and it's not a problem.
No, it's not that that wouldn't be the problem. I think the problem is if you have, let's say you have a little enhancement and people are all of a sudden seeing 20 signals that weren't there before. We don't know how Q65 30A is going to perform when we have a lot of overlapping signals, not on purpose, but just because the band came up. We don't know what's going to happen yet. We have not watched it occur. I've seen some single overlapping work just fine, but multiple stations, it's not going to be as good as FT8, that's for sure.
Well, maybe Hasan, you can give us an update maybe in a month or two, and we can do another one of these sessions, and you can kind of give us an update as to what you've learned and what's changed.
Well, yes, and especially if, as we get RC2, Release Candidate 2, and some of the other ones coming out. This is just kind of an introduction. Let's get started, and it's kind of an advertisement for a new mode that seems to be working quite well. All based on experience, not based on theory. I don't understand the theory. It's way over my head.
Yeah, so do all of us.
Question?
Oh, another question. Quick
Yeah,
one.
WB9 TFH. What about 432 megahertz?
Oh, it would work if you could find somebody to work there, sure.
And the distance on that?
I'm doing it right now. I got about 200 miles.
There isn't as much ionoscatter available on 70 centimeters as there is on 6 meters and 2 meters. So it does decrease, but you still have troposcatter, tropoducting available. And right. I don't know what, I think there can be some E-skip on 432, but it's not great. But for sure, you could still run. Troposcatter is good out to about 400 miles, I believe. I think that's correct. So you could run troposcatter with enough, if you have enough juice to run it, on 432 without any trouble at all. I ran troposcatter on 3 gigahertz when I was in the Army, over 175 mile path, but we were also running 1800 watts output on 3 gigahertz.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, I think this has been an amazing session. I want to thank Hasan and Jim and everyone else who's joined in. We've gone for almost 2 hours, which is, I think, a new record for us. So a lot of fun with new modes here. And as Paul has suggested, Hasan, we'd love to hear back in a month or two, maybe after there's an RC2, some more experimenting, and also from any of you folks, what what you've learned or what you're doing. Feel free to message all of us from the Front Range 6 Meter Groups IO if you can, and otherwise I think we'll look forward to having a lot more fun with this going forward.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
It's been fun, guys. Thanks a lot.
See you later. Bye for now.
Thank you, Hasan.
Great
Thanks,
conference,
Paul.
guys.
Great presentation.
Thank you, Hasan, Jim, and Lance.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Good job, guys.
Catch you on the rocks in the morning.